Please welcome to the stage Liz Hoffman, business editor at Semafor, to facilitate a conversation on emerging cyber threats.
Hi, Matthew.
Hey Liz, thanks
Got
for having me.
Matthew Princey of Cloudflare here. We're going to talk about cybersecurity for a little while. So, just setting the table, how have threats changed in terms of where they're coming from and what they look like in the time you've been in this business, which is a while?
Yeah, I've been working in cybersecurity now for 25 years. I think over the course of the last year, the big changes have been one, we're just seeing increasing attacks targeting anything that's touching crypto and cryptocurrency. Even as we've seen the cryptocurrency universe shrink, there is still a real effort by cyber criminals to go after the places where it touches in one way or another. And so that has really been the biggest change probably over the last 5 years, is that the old adage is that why do bank robbers rob banks? It's because it's where the money is. Why do cyber criminals go after cryptocurrency? It's because it's where the money is. And it is a very effective way for them to monetize the attacks that they're seeing. And so we're seeing that not only target directly those companies that are interacting with cryptocurrency, but anything that is ancillary to it as well, providing support services or other things. And so often the attacks that you read about in the newspaper, if you analyze what was going on behind the scenes, often it's going after cryptocurrency. I think the other big theme is that we've had a real shift in the attacks that have been sort of nation state sponsored. We're seeing more and more, obviously, attacks in Russia targeting Ukraine. That started back in December of 2021, prior to the invasion, and we actually picked up signals around that and briefed Western governments on what we were seeing, because we thought that it was a precursor to what unfortunately turned out to be true, which was the invasion of Ukraine. And so I think that has picked up. What hasn't happened as much as I would have anticipated a year ago was that Russia would target other countries that are supporting Ukraine. Most of the effort still seems to be focused very much on targeting Ukrainian infrastructure. We've seen a slight pickup in attacks against other Ukrainian allies, so Japan, Germany, Poland, the UK to some extent, but we really haven't seen those attacks target U.S. infrastructure in the scale and scope that we anticipated a year ago. So I think first theme has really been around cryptocurrency, and then the second is that we're seeing the on-the-ground conflicts in Ukraine spill over into the cyber realm as well.
I want to poke at that for a second because, when Russia invaded, I think there was a sense that this would be a quieter war, a digital war, that instead of seeing bombs explode, you would see cities just suddenly go dark or the water just stop running, and it would be these cyber attacks. And instead we've got, tanks rolling across Europe. I'm curious why you think that is. Is there more under the surface that we're not seeing? And if you could actually just drill down a little bit on what you said too, which is the sort of bomb radius or the blast radius of whatever cyber attacks Russia is doing seem to be pretty narrowly geographically contained. I don't know if are there technical reasons behind it, or there are geopolitical reasons behind it. What you make of the fact that this has been a louder, more kinetic war than people thought it would be?
I think that the first thing has been this really is the first war of the sort of modern digital age, and while there's absolutely a kinetic component to it, what I think has actually been pretty striking has been how the Ukrainians have been very effective at not only being able to get information from outside of Ukraine into Ukraine, but probably even more importantly, getting information from inside Ukraine back out to the rest of the world. And I think that President Zelensky, is really good at the internet and has been very good at really rallying across the modern internet the ability to get support for his country's efforts to repel an invader. And if the internet hadn't stayed on, I don't think you would have seen the same outcomes that we've seen. And again, it's still incredibly horrific, but I think that I am certainly surprised at how effective Ukraine has been at being able to repel what seemed at first like a much better resourced attacker. And so at Cloudflare, we've been working very hard to make sure that those lines of communication stay open, both inside of Ukraine, so that Ukrainians can get the message out and also get information in. But then also inside of Russia, as Russia tries to clamp down and censor the internet, making sure that those people who are average Russian citizens can still see Western news. And today, we estimate that over 10% of Russian households use Cloudflare's technology in order to bypass censorship. I have the somewhat dubious distinction of having been personally sanctioned by the Russian government, which actually I think makes it clear that we're doing good work in making sure that the internet stays on. And I think that as you've seen Russia, even in the kinetic space, target things, what they're going after is oftentimes the infrastructure that allows the internet to stay on, going after power infrastructure. We've seen when they have taken territory that one of the first things that they do is actually redirect internet traffic. So instead of flowing out through neighboring Western countries, it flows back in through Russia. And so I think even as this has been a very kinetic war and incredibly hard to watch, the digital aspect and being able to control that digital aspect is still something that is new in this experience, and I think it actually does foretell a lot of what war looks like going forward.
So no summer vacation to St. Petersburg for you.
No,
You're not welcome. I wouldn't think.
No,
I want to talk about two trends that I think have huge implications for cybersecurity. First is AI. And I want to talk about it in two ways, but still a lot of attacks, these phishing attacks, are still fairly lowest common denominator. The Nigerian prince is not particularly convincing, pretty crude. Do you worry that with the ability of AI to generate much, incredibly lifelike language, to sound like your boss, to sound like a family member, that sort of amplify the efficiency of those attacks?
Yeah, I think that first of all, whenever you have a new technology, there are going to be good uses and bad uses for it. In the good uses of AI, we've always thought it sounded a little presumptuous to call Cloudflare an AI company, but behind the scenes, the way that we provide the security that we do is we sit in front of somewhere between 20 and 25% of the web. We use all the data that flows through that in order to look for what are cyber attacks and patterns in order to protect all of our customers, and we use machine learning to do that. In the same way that ChatGPT and OpenAI have really, in the last 18 months, seemed like they went from sort of a crude toy to being much surprising and an amazing resource. I think internally we've seen that our ability to detect attacks, detect bot traffic, detect what is fake traffic has gone up at the same time and for the same reasons. Access to more data, ability to process that data, ability to draw inference from that data. That all has actually helped us better protect our customers. On the other side, I think we do worry about what the malicious uses of AI are, and I think that the one that you pointed to is probably the one that I worry about the most. I don't think AIs are going to be anytime soon finding new sort of zero-day vulnerabilities that are that unique. But I do think that the ability to impersonate identity in various ways is something that is a new threat that we need to take seriously. The good news is that the new approaches to security, if you talk about zero trust security, if you talk about some of the ways that security has been advancing, they rely much less on, did you recognize somebody's voice or does their picture look like them? And they rely on much more secure, very unforgeable pieces of information. And so I think we will see that the threats for those companies that haven't made that jump to sort of a modern security posture, that is going to become more and more of a liability for them. But the good news is that we have solutions to this. Those solutions we know work. We've seen that there has been very targeted attacks that have targeted companies like Cloudflare, companies like Google, that these approaches can repel. And so I think that's just going to accelerate. AI is just going to accelerate the move to that more secure security solution, that more secure set of solutions. And the good news is that not only will protect against a clever AI, but it also protects against the Nigerian prince.
But is that your way of saying the internet isn't going to be safe until everything is retina scans? I mean, is that the end point? And if it is, shouldn't we just try to get there?
Yeah, well, again, retina scans, I actually think is much more forgeable than things like, I mean, these are the hard keys that we hand out to all of our team, and there's nothing about this that can be forged. It is sending a piece of an encrypted token back and forth that no AI, no intelligent human can be able to spoof in any way. And that's a relatively inexpensive technology. And again, in working in the security space for 25 years, it really is the move towards zero trust security, the move towards things like hardware tokens, that is the biggest improvement in security. And it's the first thing that in the last 25 years, once we had that implemented at Cloudflare, and once we implement that for customers that buy those services from us, it helps me sleep a lot better. And it's what I tell other CEOs, that if they are worried about security, it's the best place where they can invest resources in order to be much more secure.
Okay. The second trend I wanted to get on is remote work. We're a couple years into this. You've seen workforces, governments, companies distributed everywhere. A lot of systems were thrown up quickly and probably, from a technical perspective, somewhat duct taped. I'm curious whether you think there are vulnerabilities that were baked into that as you sort of distribute people away from sort of secure server centers, offices, whatever it is, what that looks like and what kind of risk has been thrown into the system.
Again, I think that this is sort of the tale of the haves and the have-nots. I think that there are companies that have taken this opportunity to redesign how their security systems worked. And they're going to be much more secure, not only again from the threats of today, but from the threats of tomorrow. And then there are others that are still relying on an old school world of security, but now have a much bigger attack surface. And so the best metaphor that I've heard to describe sort of this change is, if you think about how we used to build boats. The way you used to build boats a long time ago was you build a boat. Had a hull, you'd worry that there might be some sort of puncture in the hull, and so you kept making the hull thicker and thicker and thicker. But the problem was, if there ever was, if you hit a big enough iceberg or someone, fired a big enough cannonball through you, it would burst the hull, and then the whole boat would potentially sink. That's the equivalent of how security has been done for most of the last, 30 years in cybersecurity, where you created sort of a protected network that was trusted. And then you built a perimeter around that was the effective hull of that. And anything that was inside that network was trusted, and you could do whatever you wanted, and anything that was outside of it was untrusted. But the problem was, if anyone could figure out how to breach that hull, you could take the entire boat down. And time again, across organization after organization after organization, when you read about these breaches in the newspaper or online, it's that the organizations have continued to build kind of an old school boat. We don't build boats that way anymore. We build boats with bulkheads that contain any sort of leak into whatever smallest component that is. And that is the fundamental idea of this zero trust security. And the great thing about that is it means that you can distribute your workforce around the world. You can say that anytime somebody is accessing an application, anytime that somebody is accessing a piece of data, that they have to prove that they are who they say they are. That you essentially have checks at every step. And if one employee gets breached, then that blast radius of that, the bulkheads around that, contain that risk. And so, again, I think that there are organizations that have used the last 3 years and the shift to remote work in order to modernize their security approach, to adopt zero trust principles, to adopt solutions like Cloudflare. And then there are others that are still trying to, again, hold things together with duct tape, and they've just built a bigger boat. But if there's a leak anywhere, there's a much bigger risk now that there's a leak somewhere in it. And so I think there are companies that are significantly more secure because of the last 3 years. And unfortunately, there are a handful of companies that are actually significantly less secure because of the last 3 years.
Speaking of things you would like to think are secure that perhaps are not, big leak out of the Pentagon. I'm not going to ask you who you think did it, unless you have a theory that you want to share. But you know, how does something like that happen? What does it look like to you? You are good at reading the electronic signatures on these things and kind of piecing together what might have happened. And then what lessons do you take away from that?
You know, I think that that as you think about secrets, and especially if you're someone like the Pentagon, it's an incredibly hard challenge, especially when you have potentially insider threats and risks, and when we've seen folks like Edward Snowden that really sort of showed that this was something that you could do and get away with. I think that's an incredibly challenging problem for someone who has to keep every piece of data secret that is out there. And so I don't know who is behind that. I know that we work to make sure that we can protect against the sort of outsider risks that are coming in, and that compartmentalization again, that sort of bulkheads also can help protect against insider threats and risks as well. And so I think that when you have adversaries that are both outside of your organization, but then also potentially adversaries that are inside of your organization that are trying to do you harm, that's a challenge. And again, I think it's one of the other reasons why stepping up to a more modern and zero trust approach to security is something that every organization is going to have to do, or you're going to have challenges like this repeating across not just governments but corporate entities around the world.
Just about a minute or two left, and I wanted to. Can I get? There we go. Some Cloudflare data. You can see these are cyber attacks that are on the rise. But actually, the one I wanted to look at is this. You guys have broken this down by industry, and some I think are maybe not that surprising. A lot of cyber attacks happen at internet companies. Some were surprising to me. Like, what is valuable to a hacker about a marketing agency or an esports company? Why is, for example, banking and crypto so far down that list? What do you make of kind of where the juicy targets are these days?
I think anywhere that an attacker is able to potentially find a weakness and a vulnerability. And so I think a couple of things are playing off on that sense. First of all, the crypto and the financial sectors know that they are constantly under attack, so they tend to invest in cybersecurity protections in order to stay in front of it. Whereas oftentimes small businesses don't have those resources or protections in place, and so they are more likely to be attacked. And so often what's happening in these cases is that an attacker is saying, I'm going to knock you offline unless you pay some sort of ransom in order to be available. And it's one of the reasons why at Cloudflare from our earliest days, we didn't think that security should be reserved for only those people that had big budgets and could pay for it, but we have a free version of our service that can protect a lot of these organizations. And it's why we're proud that, again, somewhere between 20 and 25% of the web relies on us to make sure that we're that front line of defense that they have. And so the good news that we see is that once Cloudflare is protecting you, attackers tend to look elsewhere and tend to move away from that, especially in these sort of ransomware or sort of annoyance level of attacks. But what's an annoyance, to us can be life or death to a small marketing agency. We see cases where even rival businesses. We saw 2 spa owners that were launching cyber attacks against each other because they were competing in that space. And so I think that as these attacks get easier for more organizations to run, you're going to see more ways that cyber criminals will use them, and we stand ready to protect businesses both small and large.
That's all the time we have. Matthew, thank you for joining us. It's a good chat.
Thank you so much for having me.